So we'll go ahead and we'll see that how these base objects are being created and how it would be looking in the backend. So I have few lookup entities already, so I won't be creating these entities, but I'll be creating few others for us to go ahead and see what is the detail. And we'll just see how this actually goes ahead and where is the refresh? So we'll see all the tables which will be created in the backend for the same. Okay. So first thing is we have to select our schema, the database which we'll be working on. So as I have selected my CMX ORS. Earlier you were seeing multiple other tables, so I have gone ahead and cleaned up that so that it would be a little bit much more easier for me to go ahead and showcase all these. So before we go in and do any kind of manipulation or starting to do any kind of configuration, first thing is we have to acquire the lock. Okay, I have already acquired the lock. So when I go ahead and create a right click, I'm seeing this box. So if you have selected base object, if I'll do a add item, over here item type will be selected as base object. But if I'll be selecting landing table and I click anywhere, it would be landing table. But we can go ahead and change from over here as well. Okay. Always a base object would be BO and then table name. See over here, as we were talking about secure resources and private resources, right? So this is where we go ahead and select if we are trying to create it as secure resource or a private resource. Okay. So by default, it would be created or the selection would be there as secure resource. If we have to make it private, then we'll just unselect it and it will be created as a private resource. Okay. So we just created a CBO party. So before we go in and create any attributes, we'll see how many tables will be created for that same. You can see this table is being created in the backend. These many tables are created for party, in which cross-reference we have gone ahead and discuss what cross-reference will be holding. Now remaining tables, dirty, CTL, VCTL, STRP, VCT, and VXR. These all tables with match and merge. These all table are somewhere in the process it is utilized by match and merge. And all these tables, this dirty will be taking care of all the dirty indicators. So we'll be going ahead and discussing about all the attributes which are there, system attributes. So this dirty indicator will be stored in as a flag for the row ID object over here in this particular table. So if we go ahead, it will just store row ID object. It doesn't store any other thing. Then match table will store which particular row ID object, what was the original row ID object matched, what was the rule, if the match score, what was the match score which happened, what is the auto merge indicator if it was false, 1 or 0, something like that. that it has to go into auto merge or a manual merge. So all those things. So over here, there is no data. It's all metadata which will be stored over here in all these tables. STRP will store the tokens, SS data, invalid indicator and all. Validation count. VXR is for validation itself. PCTL will be the control table, and this is previous or pre-control table, which particular data is coming up, from which source system it was coming up, which eventually ended up in updating the data. So all those things are there. EMI and EMO table. This is the table which is utilized for external match or for match tuning. So in the input, we'll go ahead and we'll share the file name, the source name, and the source key. And from there, it actually goes ahead and picks the data before loading that what will be the output of those data with all the match scores. So we don't have to load the data in and then go ahead and do a match merge and then go ahead and tune the match merge. We can do a tuning of match merge utilizing the external match input and external match output table. These two tables we can go ahead and see over here. Okay. So these table will be directly created. Now, when I open this one, there are multiple other modules or functionalities which got opened up, in which few of them are there for showcasing what is the name of the table, like history. Right now, there is no history which is enabled. So that's why it is stating that. Otherwise, it will show the table name as this for history. Match and merge, all the match and merge for this particular table, we will be going ahead and we will be configuring over here. Now there is a validation rule. So over here, validation rule, the entire functionality or the utilization is completely different. It is not utilized to go ahead and reject the data or to perform some kind of cleansing or standardization with the validation. Basically, over here, validation is utilized with the match and merge. If the validation rule or the validation of that particular attribute is not correct, then lower the trust value. If it is null, then lower the trust value according to how much percentage we want to go ahead and make it less. So for that particular purpose, we have validation rules. For standardization, we have cleanse functions. Okay. Message trigger setup. So over here, we'll be setting up the triggers for the attributes if the attributes are getting updated or if the record is being created, in which particular sense we want this to happen. Okay. So before going into columns or to creating the attributes, we'll go into the properties which what are there. So in the basic properties, we can go ahead and enable the history from over here. It's pretty simple. Just save it. So right now you're seeing how many tables are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 12 tables, including the main table, right? Now, if I enable the history, just look at how many tables will get updated. Are you seeing the new tables which are coming up? History of control, history. This was already there. History of pre-control table, history of VXR, cross-reference, right? So what all table we discuss? Cross-reference, this, history, and this one. All these four tables are the ones which will be holding your data. All the other tables will be either holding the process, the metadata for match and merge, or metadata for the updates which happened. Nothing else. Your data will be only stored in these four tables. And how they are linked? Row ID object to this, row ID object to this. History of cross reference is having row ID xref. You can see. History of cross reference is having row ID xref, row ID object, both. History will be only having row ID object. Cross reference will be having row ID xref, row ID object. This is something which we discussed at the end yesterday. PK source object, right? And the row ID system is the source system name. So right now there is a period start date and end date. There is no version over here, right? These are the two attributes which will be always null. But when we go ahead and enable the timeline, so first thing is, when do we use timeline, or what is the reason behind using the timeline, right? Or what is timeline? So timeline is utilized mostly in product which are expiring products like drugs or spirits. If it is going ahead, or any product which is a lifetime insurance or financial way where there is an expiry date, what happens with that is, if we enable the timeline, we need to enable the state management as well for that. So if I just go ahead, use a dynamic timeline, it will state that state management and history to be enabled. If I'll go ahead and enable it, if I'll just click OK, it will go ahead and enable the state management also for this. Okay, which means over here in the advanced, we'll go ahead. So when we enable the timeline, there would be a period start date and end date, which is there. It will be utilizing that to have the record active or in soft delete state. That the record is being sent from source, but if the end date is less than the system date, it will go ahead and auto soft delete that particular record. For those purposes, we go ahead and use timeline. Clear? So which we saw right now, the period start date and end date, right? So if this becomes less than my system date, the record will directly go ahead and soft delete itself. Okay.
So just with the examples or scenarios you mentioned, so these two dates, right, in the table, so that we need to receive it from the source, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Either
so still
it
is
be,
a, it's kind of a, so it's kind of a system generated column to do this comparison or that check with
right. It's
system
an
date.
internal process. It's an internal process.
Okay. So if it receives some data in that, I mean, in those columns, it will do this internal comparison or check.
Correct. So first thing is we have to enable this timeline option for that. So what are there in the advanced feature? So from over here till over, I would say over here, just 300, right? Anything we go ahead and change. So if the token ratio, so regeneration. So if a record is updated more than 60%, then my token should be regenerated for that particular record. Otherwise, not. So if I lower this, it will end up in creating multiple tokens or regenerating the multiple tokens, which will end up in performance. Okay. Load batch size, it's 1 million. Okay. So
Ajay,
yeah,
so like tokenized ratio, like how do you come up with the value like 60?
it's a default.
Is it a maximum or
No, it's a
okay?
default. All these are default, which are being updated by Informatica.
Okay. So are there any scenarios where you need a higher like tokenized ratio or lower tokenized ratio, or it usually like 60 is only what is used?
It is rarely, I would say 0.01%, it has been updated. And the only update is I have seen is in product, where they stated that they have duplicate, but their duplicate is moreover in very smaller fraction. You can go ahead and state that these are duplicates. So we had to increase the token length to take the data from all those attributes almost entirely. So for that, we had to increase this token ratio.
Okay. And this token, like, is it like some primary key or like something like that, or
No, it
the
would
key?
be a random key generated by the algorithm which are being utilized by Informatica. It will be random alpha numeric values which will be generated by the data which is being there.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So load batch size, it is 1 million, which is being default configured. So if we go ahead and lessen that, that will split our batch if our batch is having more number of data. If we increase that, then it will. So anything, if we are changing less, then it will increase the performance. If we are going ahead more, then it will take more memory. Okay. Any questions over here? So match minutes, if the matching of the data is going more than 20 minutes, that will abort it. So maximum minutes we can go ahead for matching is 20. Parallel degree, if we want to go ahead and do any kind of parallel processing on this particular table, we can increase that. But we don't increase these because if let's say if I'm doing two parallel, then if there is any update on a single attribute by multi-thread, you don't know which one will be updated or it might go ahead into a wrong area and form a issue for us. Generate match tokens on load. If we enable it, then all the batch load, whenever the batch is coming up, the tokens for that particular data will be created in the load time itself. All those things are there. So state management, we discussed what is the state management. This link style and merge style. So for link style, it was earlier, it was there. Now it is utilized, or now it is being given as per requirement as an external plugin. Only in that you'll be able to have a link style as well, which means it will create a new table for linking. It will create a new relationship whenever there is a data to be merged together. So it will still have duplicates, but it will be reflecting as relative to each other, stating that it's a duplicate data. Okay. The last one is lookup indicator. So any base object, if we have to create it as a reference table, the difference between a normal main table and a reference table is this flag. If this flag is enabled, that means it's a reference table. If it's not enabled, that means it's a main table. And that is why these naming convention came in. So BO comes for base object, LKP comes for lookup or reference table. Okay. So we have a state management which is enabled. We'll go ahead and save that.
And from where do you enable that? The other one, that workflow.
Workflow. So workflow is something you go ahead and design it in the ActiveOS designer. It's a different tool altogether. So this is something which is there. So we have to deploy the workflow over here. That BPR file which we'll be creating in the ActiveOS designer. So that's a complete different thing. So over here we can go ahead and monitor which is the active process which is going on for any workflow thing. So there are no active process as we don't have any workflow which is being deployed. So that is something we can go ahead and see it over here. Other than the default ones, I don't think so there should be any workflow which will be deployed. You can see all these are the default workflows. These are needed to run the working, a proper working of E360. Okay. Over here we deploy that. And how we will be configuring, we'll see that part in provisioning tool, but we will not see how to create the workflows.
Okay, even for this E360 IDD, all those will also come under the same UI part, or
No. UI
when you
is
say UI, only this.
UI is E360. E360, C360, these are the UI.
Okay, so
State
this
management
workflow
is
will fall
utilized
under
for,
all.
correct. Workflow is there for UI side, and the state management. This is there for either data manager or the batch.
Okay.
Okay.
So when a record is being created from UI, right? I mean, say data manager. If state management is enabled, then that will be also created with hub state indicator 0, right?
Correct. So if we are not specifying any attribute for that or the value for that, it will be converted as 1. If we are submitting the value, then it will be taking as 0 or 1, whatever we specify.
Sorry, I didn't get that. At specifying the value for what? For all the attributes, all the user-defined attributes.
User-defined attributes plus the hub state indicator. You have to send the hub state
Oh,
indicator
okay.
state management.
Oh, okay. If the hubs, okay. So if hub state indicator is not mentioned in the source, then it will be, the record will be created with hub state indicator 0.
1.
If it is not mentioned also.
Correct.
While creating the record, it will be created with 1. If it is, oh, okay.
Over here, so you can see the default values.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. So if it is mentioned with 0, then so where exactly this comes into picture? Then hub state indicator, we can manually specify these values, right? With if it is 0, then it
In
will
the
be like
landing
pending, and if
table.
it is 1, then it will be active.
So when you will be pushing the data to landing table, you will also push the hub state indicator with that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So
that
in
is
that
correct.
state, you will push the data as 0. And that
Got it.
0 will
Fine.
be going ahead and getting created in MDM.
Okay, then where this comes into picture, that particular option you selected, right? That state management.
State management gives you the ability to update this attribute as user defined attribute. If you don't enable it, you cannot update the hub state indicator. It becomes a system attribute.
Okay, fine. So if it is not enabled, then when a new record is created, what will be the hub state indicator? It will be 0 first.
It will be always 1.
Oh, okay. So this approval process, everything is through that ActiveOS workflow only.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So if it comes under workflow, then it will be created with 0, and upon approval, it will get changed to 1. Am I right?
Correct. Okay. So over here, other attributes.
Sorry, just to like add to Anish's question. So with normal flow, right? So data would be coming, so that would be getting updated with the one hub state indicator, right? Which comes from the source, or that will also be into pending state.
So if you are using source system, batch basic.
Yeah.
When I say source system, then it means batch. Okay. So batch means if you are putting the data into landing. Okay. So over here, if you have enabled the hub state management, then you can update hub state indicator. So over So HSI will be updated from over here, and it will be updated till base object. It will also get updated accordingly. Okay. Now, if it is batch and state management enabled, if you disable it, then even if you put the HSI indicator in landing table, it will not go into staging, and it will not even contain any base for the base object. It will go over here, but it will not update the base object, because for base object, HSI becomes system attribute, and you cannot update the system attribute because you have this as disabled. So user doesn't have the power to update a system attribute.
Okay.
Okay. But if you have disabled this, so when state management is disabled, but you are using workflow. So until that workflow is completed, the record will be created as a 0 with HSI or the hub state indicator as 0.
Okay.
Okay. Because there is no landing, there is no staging table involved over here. It is directly in base object. So is the record correct or is the record needs to be updated? It's something like that. If you need that, that means you have to make sure that the data is approved. If you're not using it, that means the data is already been approved.
So for this approval and all right, so the approver, where he'll be seeing these records, this will be stacked up somewhere, right? Is this under data manager or does it have any
No,
other interface where he can
it will
go and?
be in task. It will be in E360 as tasks.
Oh, okay. Oh, got it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So coming back to all the attributes, certain attributes are directly being understood by the name. This will hold the username, when it was created, when it was updated, who updated that, when it was updated. We discussed about consolidation indicator. Delete indicator are utilized by a API call, that if you want to go ahead and delete it, then we go ahead and update the indicators for mass delete. So we just go ahead, update all those delete indicators, and then we go ahead and run the API call for delete. All those records which have a delete indicator, it will go ahead and delete that. And whoever is executing the job, its name will be updated over here, and the person and the date will be updated accordingly. Last row ID system tells you which source system has gone ahead and updated the record. Dirty indicator, if there is any need of regenerating the token, then only the dirty indicator will be populated, otherwise not. Interaction ID is utilized as a session key for the workflow, and each record will have entire record, including its child. If there is any update, then it will be utilized as a key to go ahead and make sure that all the process which is getting done will get done by utilizing the same session key. So that promotion and all, or the activating that particular record becomes easier. So it is utilized for that particular purpose. Okay. Then hub state indicator and content metadata indicator will be updated if we go ahead and update the match rule, which in turn will be impacting the tokens which are already generated. So in that case, we have to go ahead and reach, and this will be regenerate the tokens and also synchronize the matching rule with the data. For that particular purpose, this content metadata indicator is being populated. Okay. So how we'll go ahead and create any attribute, just by utilizing the plus sign. Over here, one thing is you can increase the length later on, but you cannot decrease the length. So for decreasing the length, you have to delete the attribute itself. I'm directly using the first name. Second thing is, whenever you have to go ahead and create a relationship, your data type and your length should be equal. Otherwise, you cannot go ahead and create the relationship. I have not created that. Perfect. So I'll just go ahead and save it. So all these attributes will be created accordingly. Now, what are these all checkboxes stand for? If I'll go ahead and remove this nullable, which means it becomes a required attribute. If it's a required attribute, then it will go as default. If there is a null, then what data should be updated over there? So until we go ahead and give a data, it will not be taking it as a required attribute over here. So either we use this or we use unique. If I'll put it as unique, as default will go away, which means null is also allowed, but only a single. But we are stating nullable is not allowed, so your null becomes gone. Okay. Now, second thing is trust and validate. So only those attributes where there is a trust which is given, only those attributes will be going into trust, or we can go ahead and manipulate the trust score for those attributes only. Not all the attributes are allowed, which means if I'll just go ahead, remove this, save it. In the system interest, I have created it. So how do we create? Right click, add, and we'll go ahead and create. So in the trust, we are not seeing anything right now, correct? But if I'll go ahead and enable the trust for these two attributes, let's say, save it. In the trust now, I have the table name, and in the table name, I have the attributes which we have enabled the trust for. And currently there is no staging table, so that's why we are only seeing admin as source system, which is internal. Okay. Other functionalities over here, minus is for removing, this is for edit. What you can go ahead and edit, you can just edit the description. Then this is for shifting the attributes up and down, and these are used for importing the schema if you want to import the schema from anywhere.
So can this be done from a text file also? I mean, just now it showed that Oracle database, right?
Yeah.
So if my source is a flat file, so okay. So if you have a source of 50 columns, then all the 50 columns I have to manually add here.
Correct. Okay. Then validate. as the trust is there, if I have not enabled any validate functionality, then I cannot use the validation rule setup for any attribute. Apply null values. This is something which is most important in MDM because MDM says enrich the data. It never says that you have to go ahead and remove any data or lower the values. So there are scenarios where customer says that they need to update null as well. So if you have three source systems and two of them is having the data and you go ahead and apply null on a particular attribute, then the other source system data will be populated in the base object, right? But if I go ahead and apply null values check, then if I go ahead and apply null or update the attribute as null, that will be treated as an update as an value, and it can be there in the base object or in the main table as a null value, even though other source system is having the value for them. If the trust score is more or if it is the latest data, then it will be going as null. Okay. Any questions or confusion?
Ajay, this null apply null values. This is not actually very clear to me.
Okay. So let's say you have a phone number of a customer and he has gone ahead and updated it.
Okay.
Okay. So basically what happens is you do not have that particular updated value with you. So basically what data you are storing? You are storing the wrong data, right?
Yeah.
Till you get the updated communication detail, that data is wrong. So you have to delete that particular data, particular value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, if your source systems are having different values, you cannot go ahead and update null if you have not applied it. So even if you go ahead null, if you just delete the value from one source, the other source value will be popping up in the base object, right? As we discussed yesterday,
Yeah. Yeah.
correct? So how to go ahead and treat the null values as updates, that this is the latest value. How we can go ahead and do that? By applying null value as enabled, so that if I want to go ahead and delete any value in future, it should remain or it should be treated as an update. So the other source system values is there, even if then also it will be going ahead and it will be updated, or the base object will be still having a null value as I have gone ahead and updated null value. Okay.
Okay. So basically, when we check the first nullable column, and that particular one CMX source has say the highest trust score.
Okay.
So still, if it is not coming from the source, or basically for that particular name, it is coming as null. as first name. So it will go qualify for a soft delete, and then it will take from the other source system. Is that correct understanding?
It will not go for soft delete. If your attribute is not having value, let's say, as you stated, your CMS source system was there and it was having the latest or the highest source, right? You stated that the CMS or the CMS system is having the highest trust score, which means any
Yeah.
value which is flowing from that particular system should be treated as the value for that particular attribute, correct?
Correct. Correct.
If I am flowing in null values and I have not applied over here and just this one, right? So it will be treated as a null. It won't be treated as an update. If the value is not there, that means it will go ahead and check for any other value which is coming from any other source system. And it will take it as a value for that particular attribute. Next highest trust value. But
Okay.
if I
Okay.
would have applied null values, so it will take the null value as a value and it will showcase null on that particular attribute. So it is basically states that do you want to consider null as a value or not?
Got it. Got it. Clear now. Yeah.
We are good.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I was just like confused when if it is a high source, highest trust score record still, but then yeah. So this is basically how it is configured. So yeah, got it.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
no problem. So let's say we have only these attributes over here. So how to create staging table? So one thing to see over here in staging table, it is divided into two parts. First is just to create the staging table. Second is how we go ahead and use references in staging table or configure the references in staging table. Because let's say you are sending address for a particular party. So you will go ahead and send the complete data at one go, right? You will send the data as one single data, correct? That you will send the party data as well as address data together, right? In both the tables, landing table, correct? So over here, you will send it in the party landing. And for this, you will send the data into landing for address table, correct? This is correct from the source. So until the data is being created in the MDM, you do not know what is the row ID object for party, correct? So how you will go ahead and link the data which is coming in address table for which particular party it is, right? So you have to create references to be looked up in staging table. Because outside MDM, you use PKSRC, right? Primary key source, correct? Outside MDM, you are creating a primary key which is coming from source. It may be considered by multiple attributes or it may be considered by a single attribute, correct? So this kind of a lookup, we will go ahead and put a reference in. So one is that. Second is always, it's basically always go ahead and use base object to look up for reference table. Second is always use PKSRC for the main tables. So how we'll be going ahead and doing that, we'll just see that. So I'll just go ahead and create a address table as well. So address is created. So we'll use the same settings which we just utilized for party. And one thing is never utilize history for reference data unless and until the reference data is needs to be updated inside MDM as well. So we'll just go ahead create the attributes for this. So first is party ID. It would be char 14 as the row ID object. Second is address line 1. It would be, let's say, 250. Same. Let's create country. Over here, I have created country as attribute, right? So I'll just utilize ISO code 3. And I'll use state. State I'll use char, and I'll just go ahead and use 14 for 1 second. Or I can just go ahead and utilize city. And it would be a var. We'll just go ahead. State, I still need to check what is the unique attribute over here. So let's say we have created this one. So how to create the relationship first? We will always go into child table. Lookups or the reference tables are always parent in MDM or in any RDBMS because those are the tables which are always populated first. Only then you will be looking up into that particular value from there, right? So we always go into relationship. These are references. So over here, you can see that the foreign key from VO address, this is coming from this particular table. So table references is basically where this table is going ahead and being a child of which particular main tables. And over here it is parent. So we'll go ahead, we'll create party ID to CPU party row ID object. We'll create the reference accordingly. Once the reference is created, if you are not seeing like this right now, we are not seeing the reference which was created. Just go into any other configuration and come back again. So you'll see that. So in the reference, we have two major things. So when we set up any reference in cross reference, there are two attributes you will go ahead and see. One is party ID and the other attribute will be S_party ID. Party ID and S_party ID, right? Always the S_party ID is a source party ID, which means the relationship when we are creating the relationship is created from row ID object. But if you want to see the any other attribute in base object, we can go ahead and change it over from here. If we have to see registry ID, we'll just select registry ID. So now the data in the base object for address table over here in party ID, I will be seeing the value as registry ID, not as a row ID object. So for that particular purpose, our lookup display name is utilized. But normally over here, we don't utilize it anymore because nobody is utilizing the data manager nowadays. It's very rarely utilized. So these things we go ahead and configure in provisioning tool, that what data we want to see. Okay. So the other relationships we'll go ahead and create for country. Now we'll go ahead and create staging table. So best thing to create staging table is right click, add the staging table. So you can see I am having all the attributes over here itself. And you can see that these two where I have created the relationship, there is a magnifying glass as well. The icons are different. And the nomenclature is STG, name of the table, and then name of the system which we are creating it for. So for every source, there is a table.
So can't there be something like for like one, like say address, there can be just one table with all the sources, or that is not possible?
That is possible, but why you want to go ahead with that? How will you know that from which particular source that particular address came in? The row ID system will be updated with the system which we have configured it for. So we don't go ahead and populate the system name. We just use the system name to bifurcate the data in the landing, because the landing will be created as one. So even if you have 10 sources, you will only have a single landing table, which will contain all your 10 source system. So if all your 10 source system values are all the way into one single landing, then how will you differentiate which particular data was coming from which source? So for that, we always create a source system attribute in landing, and that source system is utilized just to have a condition, a where clause kind of a thing, so that only all those values should be picked up, which are for the source which we have configured for that staging table. We'll go ahead and see that in mapping when we'll go ahead and create mapping table. Mappings for the landing and staging table. Okay. So we'll have, so one thing is we have to select the attributes over here. We never create any attribute in staging. Staging will be always a subset or a full set of your base object. It will never have any extra attributes. Now, as I was stating for lookup, right? So as this is a CRM, I can go ahead. This is the attribute which I have to actually go ahead and look up from which particular source system. So now it came into table, that you go ahead and see if this, in this particular table, this attribute, this system, the data which is coming in this particular attribute is valid or not. And for country, which is a lookup table, we always choose base object, because when you use base object, it doesn't matter from which particular source system it is coming from. Because there won't be multiple data which will be stored for, because the country is country. It doesn't matter if it was being stored from CRM, if it was being stored from SAP, it will be having the same exact numbers for country, what all countries are there. So that's why we use all the reference data as from base object. So allow
So
null.
Ajay, sorry. For the party ID, so if we keep a reference to BO reference table, suppose if it is a new party, then how this will?
So how you will be going ahead? So basically, if it's a new party, so what you will be going ahead and loading first? You will be always loading the parent first. So in the landing, you will be having all the tables data. All table will be having data, correct? So
Right.
from the stage layer or the stage process, you can have parallel processing. Okay, because there is no referential integrity comes into play. But for the load process, we always go as parent reference table. Then second is child reference table. Third is parent base object tables. Then child base object tables. If you have a grandchild as well, you will use the load process later on. You will not use parallel processing for load process. So what this means is, even though you have the data in stage for that particular address, so party ID data would be somewhat the PK source which we have created for party. So this is the reference data you will be looking for, because this is created outside MDM in the ETL itself, right? When you dump in the landing table, you will be sending the primary key, right? From the landing, when it goes to staging, your source system will be updated, correct? That will be utilized, correct? So this will be loaded into parent main base object table, correct or not? So when you go ahead from
Okay, got it.
child, you will look the
Yeah, I'm
primary
sorry.
key and the source system in the cross reference.
Yeah, right. I think somewhere I just break. That's why it's clear now.
Oh, that is fine.
I was in an impression that we are in party table. That's why.
It's
Sorry.
the address table.
Yeah.
So if we are utilizing the address table, I just created it for staging for party table, address table. So I have just added the country as well. Now we have added, or we have seen the allow null update or allow null values in columns as well, right? So the columns will work for UI as well as batch, but only if the batch, for batch it will work, but when the batch will work if even my staging layer is also having an update for that particular value. Allow null foreign key means if there is no party ID, does the record should go in or not? If we allow it, then there will be dangling records. Okay. So we never create attributes in staging. We only select the attributes and configure the lookups for the references which we created. Just click OK. The staging table will get created. Now, what are the properties in staging table? So these are the properties, simple, and these are the columns which we selected. So we can go ahead and unselect over here and we can save it. So those things can be done over here as well. But in properties, you can see that settings is disabled right now, right? So how to enable the settings for delta detection and audit is to use Informatica platform staging. So when I say when we created this staging table, let's see what all tables are created for address staging tables. These are C underscore STG tables, right? These are PO, these are LKP, RVO tables, which are there, REPA tables for system, repository tables, and then we have staging table. You can see it's two tables which are being created for staging. One is reject and one is CRM, which we created as main table, right? Now, when we enable the platform staging, save it, it will take few, sometimes it takes few minutes, sometimes it takes instant to enable the staging for us. This settings will be coming up later on. When it will be updated for that platform staging. Okay. Once we have enabled that, then the settings will be coming up for us, and then we'll be seeing how that will be updated. Sometimes it takes time, so don't worry about that. So this we'll be seeing later on. Okay, how that delta detection will be working for us. So over here, we are still having two tables. Then there would be, if we'll be going ahead and configuring the raw, then it will be updated for delta and audit. So those three tables we'll see later on. Okay. We'll go ahead and create one more. Or you want me to go ahead and do the landing table? So you can go ahead and create these tables right now. Just have to select the correct table name. Platform staging. we'll go ahead and create a landing table. So in the landing table, what extra attributes we'll be creating? We'll be creating extra attributes for row ID object, source system, and all the other attributes. For landing table, we'll go ahead add. For landing, it is LND address. For landing table, there won't be any other table which will be created in the backend. It's a simple single table. It does not have any other tables for that. You can see there is no other table which was created for LND address, right? So we'll go ahead, we'll see. So source row ID. This particular attribute is utilized to identify a record if it is rejected. So for that particular purpose, it is there. So we'll go ahead. We'll create a primary key which has 255 length. In cross reference, we'll specify row ID object. Which is char. We'll say source system. Then we have other attributes such as address line 1. We'll have address line 2. Make sure that your lengths are always in sync, because I have seen this issue with many people that they don't go ahead and put the correct lengths. Which is our varchar 255. We'll just save that. And as we have gone ahead and created the state management, we'll go ahead and create HSI indicator as well, and the character length is 1. So we just created this one. So all these attributes right now in staging, why don't we need a mapping to be created? Because we are selecting the attributes over there. We are not creating the attributes, right? But as in landing, we are creating the attribute. So we need to state which particular attribute is going where. Hence, we need mapping to be created. So we'll go into the mapping, we'll add mapping nomenclature is mtg space the table name and the source system which we are utilizing it for. We'll select and we'll create it. Did I click OK or cancel?
I think it was okay.
Even I thought it was okay. I think now it was okay. Earlier, I think I cancelled it. So the thing which we just saw for relationship, that the relationship was not shown at once, and then we just clicked on something else and came back. It was showcased to us, right? Perfect. Unexpected action. Just a second. Is the provisioning tool coming along? Basically, it is there. Then why? Let's see what is the issue. Okay, that was already been created. Yeah, you see, MDM Informatica MDM can do anything for you. So sometimes, if you see these things, don't worry, it's Informatica. It's not what you're trying to do. Okay. So in general, you'll just see the basic information diagram. This is something which in the ETL you guys would have seen, who is coming from the ETL background, right? How the mapping actually is there. So there are multiple things. So you'll see multiple different color buttons over here. So date is basically red, string is gray, integers are blue. Okay, your string cannot be converted to integer. So either you parse it, or we can go ahead and create the HSI as integer again. So we'll go over here, we'll just delete this. This will be integer, or you can say number. We'll go with integer number. No issues. A number is a float over here. So HSI to HSI, party ID to party ID, city, country, address line 2, address line 1. Then your row ID object will be going to row ID object matched. So why this is actually utilized? We discussed yesterday something about load by row ID, right? If it is null, then it will take the primary key and the source system for doing the upserts. If it is having the value, then it will go as a insert. Last update date to last update date. This source system, we always utilize it for query parameters, for where condition. Now, other than this, if there is a need of standardizing something, We have functions, constant, and conditions over here to create a cleanse function over here as well, or we can use the already created cleanse functions. So why there are two places they have given us to create the standardization process is due to two things. First, if that particular function only to be utilized by this mapping, then we create it over here. But that looks a little bit messy. So the best practice is to create the cleanse function over here and then to utilize it over here. So any function which is being created in cleanse functions, all those cleanse functions can be reutilized multiple times in any mapping, in provisioning tool for val and for validation as well. All the three areas you can go ahead and reutilize the same function. So how to create that, how we'll be doing it, we'll do it in later part of the training. Okay. So how do we utilize the query parameters? We'll just go over here. We'll say distinct. We'll say the attribute name and just validate it. So all the data which is coming with a source system as CRM, only that data will be moved from this to this. We can test, but the query parameter will not be tested from our side. So it's just a pass through. If we had a cleanse function, then that cleanse function can be tested over here. We'll just go ahead and provide the values. All those values will be mapped over here. But the query parameters we won't be able to see. That query parameter is not applicable for testing the data. It is utilized to check the diagram which we have created. Okay. For SAP also, we'll do the same thing. Okay. So that is how we'll go ahead. So you can see it is gone. I just put it over here, right? And it's gone. Sometimes you have to put again. And yes. So basically release the lock if you are not seeing that and acquire the lock again. Nice, right? Did you see the magic of Informatica? So mapping is clear.
Yeah. Also, can you just, I mean, we can utilize the cleanse functions here,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
will
can you just demonstrate that also?
cleanse functions. Sure. I was actually going for localized table actually. Is localized
Okay.
table. Okay. Suppose we'll go into the localized table. So localized table is utilized for changing the data as what your system language is. So it's not like it will translate utilizing the AI or ML or something like that. You have to have that particular data inside a table, all that translated data. So the localized tables are always into LCL. So basically you can see this lookup table. I have not enabled the history, no timeline. In the advanced, it is utilizing lookup indicator, no state management. So that it will have less and less table metadata. Okay. So in the gender table, you will see I have gender code and gender description. That's it. Right. But when we say we have to localize this particular gender data, we went ahead for created the localized table in a proper base object. We won't create it as reference. We'll create it as regular base object. We'll go into columns, and in the columns, we'll have a key column, which where we will be going ahead and creating the relationship with, a country column, a language column, and the values for that, which means for this particular code, for which country, which language, let's say if the US you have selected as country, but there are three different languages which are being spoken over there. One is English, the other one is Spanish, and the third one is Latin. So you have all the three language codes with that. So which language code you are utilizing? According to that, the value will be coming into the screen for user. So for that particular purpose, we have all these four attributes. Okay. Are we good? So why does it necessary? So it's basically depends on the customer. If they want to have translation stored in MDM. So adding a message trigger is simple. Go ahead, click, name the trigger. Let's say it is for CRM system. Okay. The package, if we have created a query and a package, when do we create a package? Basically, we create packages if we see that we have 50 attributes, but the end user or the APIs which are which will utilize this particular value needs only 2 or 3 attributes from 50 attributes. Then only we go ahead and create a package for it, so that they don't have to connect to Informatica and get the entire set of values. What I'm stating over here, that there was a API call, they need 3 attributes only. But in your table, you have 50 attributes. So if they will go ahead and use a get call, if they'll do a get call, so what they'll get all the 50 attributes. Correct? So in these scenarios where you have more number of attributes and the API which will be utilizing needs only limited number of attributes, we use packages, queries and packages. In queries and packages, what we'll be doing, we'll be only giving them display package. We'll be creating display or read packages, read query with only the attributes which that API will require. And we'll select this particular package with that. But if let's say the requirement was that API needs all the data which is being there in that particular table, then we never go ahead and utilize any package. So in this case, it will send row ID object from base object table and row ID xref from cross reference table. So if they want to see the entire data which is there in the base object, they can go ahead and do a get call with that row ID object. Else, they will go ahead and do a get call for cross reference data. So this is what message trigger is.